Senator Salazar. Senator Schuler. Chairwoman Ellis. Four present, one excused.
Good morning, everyone. Our first bill that we're hearing today is House Bill 101, elk feed ground closing requirements. I don't see the Senate sponsors or any House sponsors in the audience. Is there anyone who wants to present this bill? You can if you want to. Director Nesbitt?
I'm familiar, Madam Chair. I won't do as good a job.
Have a seat. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, this bill came with the primary sponsor out of the House, Representative Summers. And I was able to watch Representative Summers present this bill in the House side in the House committee. So I'm going to do my absolute best to talk about the major components of the bill and what he indicated his interests were here. I think, as this committee knows, there has been significant discussion over the past couple of years with regards to conflicts on feed grounds regarding two diseases, brucellosis and CWD. And now we have detected CWD in a feed ground area. And so there's been increased attention around this issue. We, the Game and Fish Department, has initiated a public outreach 2 or 3 phased project to go out and engage the public, with the first phase primarily focused on providing information to ensure that all folks involved, all stakeholders, regardless of whether they support feed grounds or don't, are at least educated on the main facts regarding why the department feeds elk up in 22 feed grounds in Northwest Wyoming, and then also the National Elk Refuge. This effort by the department and the surrounding discussion, I think, is what probably inspired Representative Summers to think about a bill that would codify in statute requirements that if there was a proposed, if the Game and Fish Commission was going to propose closing a feed ground, that they would engage in some formalized steps that would, like I said, would be codified in statute. Those steps would require the Game and Fish Department to provide information and the recommendation to the Livestock Board. And the Livestock Board would then in turn take that information and provide an opinion to the governor. And ultimately, if this bill were passed, it would formally provide the authority for a closure of a feed ground with the governor. The other components of the bill require other agencies to work with the Game and Fish Department if there was a closure, to look at other opportunities for places to relocate feed grounds if that was necessary. And I'm trying to remember if there's any other amendments that were of note from the other side. It also requires that the department would engage in and hold at least one formal public meeting with the Wyoming Livestock Board if there was a proposal. Some of the things that Representative Summers noted when he talked about this on the House side were the fact that because of litigation and because of federal agency requirements and permitting requirements by federal agencies, that a closure could come even if the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission wasn't interested in closing a feed ground. As far as some of the specific conflicts, as I mentioned early on, as I started to present this, the crux of the conflict is between these two diseases. So right now, the department has 4 major priorities and reasons why we continue to feed elk. Those are to mitigate and provide separation between wildlife and cattle so that wildlife that are carrying brucellosis don't transmit it to cattle. Secondly, to protect private property stored crops that if elk weren't on feed would have the opportunity to damage or to consume and damage stored crops like hay. Thirdly, it provides a lot of hunter opportunities. Some of the department's estimates is that if we were to stop feeding at all the feed grounds, we would have to reduce populations of elk by 60 to 80%. in that part of Wyoming. So it provides a significant amount of hunter opportunity. And then fourth, these feed grounds also prevent conflicts with other wildlife species on their winter range. The best example I can give is mule deer in the upper Green River Valley. There's a significant portion of the lower elevations of the valley that are used by mule deer in the winter. They're critical habitats in the winter. And certainly if elk were not on feed grounds, they would find themselves into these critical mule deer habitats. So those are the primary reasons that we feed elk. Now, the one, I guess one of the most controversial parts of this is that CWD in wildlife is not transmitted to cattle. It's not, there's no evidence at this point that it's transmitted to humans. However, congregating elk on feed grounds does not necessarily, the science doesn't indicate that's the best thing to do to mitigate the continued spread of CWD. So you've got this real conflict. The other conflict is that there's three federal agencies and a state agency that are all engaged in this and have to participate at some level in managing these elk. And they all have different objectives. The National Park Service is interested in providing it. They have a preservationist model, and we depend on them right now to harvest a certain number of elk in the park to help manage this herd. But that's not necessarily their primary objective. The Forest Service certainly has a huge role. We have 8 feed grounds in that part of Wyoming that where we rely on permits from the Forest Service in order to continue to feed. The Forest Service has been litigated and has significant public pressure from groups that don't like feed grounds to close them down. Then you got the National Wildlife Refuge, which is centered in kind of in the middle of this in Jackson Hole. And they've been through litigation directed to reduce the number of elk on the National Elk Refuge. That happened a long time ago, and they still haven't been able to bring those elk down to the numbers. 5,000 elk is what they're supposed to have it down to on the refuge. Some years now we see 8,000 elk on the refuge. And then you got the state agency with those 4 objectives that I just talked about. And so it's I call it it's the ultimate wicked problem with, it's one of the most complex wildlife management challenges in North America. And so anyway, I think those are some of the components or some of the reasons behind justification behind the bill that Representative Summers brought. I do have additional testimony from the department's perspective beyond just kind of laying this bill out in the background for it. But I'll stop there for any questions, Madam Chair.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, Director Nesvik, thank you. We'll feel free to add additional information if you'd like, or bring anybody up to testify if you'd like.
You bet. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I worked early on with Representative Summers when he initially discussed this. I'll tell you the practical effect on the ground I see as really minimal because, frankly, I would never propose to close a feed ground without the governor being on board. And I don't foresee that any director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department would go down that road. We, at times when we've got these kind of controversial issues, we engage the public. We're doing it now. I mean, we would certainly hold public meetings if we were to engage in anything like this. So those 2 components of the bill, really what I see this bill doing is they just put it in statute to make sure. I think that Representative Summers is interested in those being solidified with higher authority. So the impacts to the department are minimal as I see it. There have been folks that have, that the headlines, some of the headlines I've seen is, Game and Fish is stripped of their authority. And, at the end of the day, I think you all know I work for the governor and the commission is appointed by the governor. And so I don't view it that way. I don't view it as having our authority stripped away. So with that, the other components that Representative Summers put in here regarding working with state lands and other entities, those are all reasonable. The requirement to come and report to TRW in the event that something was to precipitate a feed ground closure, we would do that anyway if it was in the interests of the chairs of TRW. So from our perspective, this bill doesn't have negative or real positive impacts on the department either way.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, I just had a curiosity. Do we do any feeding other than elk now? Back in the old days, Dad and I fed about 125 head of moose up on the 40 rod. So I was just curious.
Director Nesbitt.
Madam Chair, Senator Landon. No, we did. You're exactly right. We used to feed a lot. We had several moose feed grounds, and we had other elk feed grounds. There have been a few elk feed grounds that we've discontinued feeding on. And but no, there's no other species right now that we feed.
Follow up, Mr. or Senator Landon. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of questions, actually. What would be possibly the reasons for wanting to close the elk grounds? Would it be a disease outbreak, or the numbers too large, or what would be, first of all, that'd be my first question, I guess.
Director Nesbitt.
Madam Chair, Senator Schuler. So we've asked our field people for many years now to look for opportunities to reduce our reliance on supplemental feeding in the interest of not congregating elk in the winter. However, the caveat to that the direction I've provided to my folks is that the only way we can propose or go down any kind of road like that is if we can continue to meet those 4 objectives. So one example could be that if we were to secure some type of a large lease or even an acquisition of a large piece of property next to a feed ground, and we could, close one feed ground to spread them out on a bigger piece of ground, that would be one place where we would potentially propose to close a feed ground. We've had the more likely route would be that a federal agency says, no, we're not going to issue a permit. You're not going to feed on the forest anymore. And I don't, the Forest Service has been good to work with on this. They've permitted these for a long time. However, I think that where they could find themselves in that position is if they were litigated. It has happened on one feed ground where they were litigated. And the consequence of that decision is that we worked with them to not formally call it a feed ground. We hadn't fed there in many years anyway. We used it as an emergency feed ground in really bad years. It's in the middle of the refuge and 2 other feed grounds. And so in that case, it really made sense as long as we maintained that ability for 5 years anyway to emergency feed if we needed to. So those would be probably the 2 primary reasons. If we could go back 100 years and back when these decisions were made that we all get to deal with now, we probably would have done things quite a bit different. And I'm not sure that we would have done it, the same way. I think we would have looked for ways to not rely on supplemental feeding and try to find other ways to allow those wildlife to leave the area in the winter and go to the places they did 150 years ago in the winter. But again, we're in the spot we're in, and we can't, from the department's perspective, we certainly can't have wildlife threatening cattle or threatening our tourism industry, threatening our opportunities to hunt.
Additional questions for Director
I
Nesbitt.
think you may have answered my follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask about plans that you may have had for alternate feed grounds. It sounds like you kind of already got that in the works, but if you could elaborate, thank you.
Director Nesbitt.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Schuler, we have looked for as many opportunities as we can with the resources that exist on the ground and the conditions on the ground. Some of these places are in areas where, once those elk are there, they're snowed in. And so finding alternate places would be difficult. Now we have looked at places that are coming up for renewal on our Forest Service permits in the near future at, what happens if. And so we've done some contingency planning adjacent to those, but, we don't have anything in concrete yet if that were to happen.
Thank you.
Further questions for Director Nesbitt? Director, when you get back to your desk, I would love just to see a map of where the feed grounds are, just so we have a sense of what that looks like, where they are in Forest Service lands, Park Service lands. And then just about how many elk do we feed outside of the National Wildlife Elk or the National Refuge? I'm just kind of get my head around some numbers in case, so we're prepared on the floor.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. So we feed right now on the Wyoming Game and Fish Department feeds about on the average 17,000 elk. And the map will be no problem. We'll have a map to you today.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you, Director Nesbitt. If you don't mind sticking around, we'd appreciate it. Just so I have a sense of how many people want to testify on this bill and on the internet. For internet participants, can you just raise your hand so we can get a sense of how many people would like to testify? We've got 3 bills and I want to try and get through them all today. And then members of the public, if you want to raise your hand to testify on this bill, I see quite a few. I see 6 individuals. So how about we try and limit our testimony to about 5 minutes each and less, and let's try not to be redundant. Go ahead and raise your hands again and let me know if you'd like to testify on this bill if you're in person. We'll start here in the front row with Mr. Novotny and Mr. Livingston.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. Bill Novotny with the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association. I'm joined today by our immediate past president, Lee Livingston, who also serves on the State Outfitters Board. We stand in strong support of this bill. We think it's critical to the long-term viability of the elk herd, which then enables us to offer a tourism experience for people, whether it's to take pictures or to come to Wyoming and harvest a big game animal. As the director mentioned, it was the legislature that actually made this decision in the early 1900s to begin feeding elk. And we strongly believe that any decision to move away from that would put the resource in grave jeopardy. And so we would ask you to just please advance this bill and we would stand for any questions. And I would yield to Mr. Livingston.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lee Livingston, outfitter from up Northwest Wyoming. Mr. Novotny was quite eloquent about the industry's support of this bill. I'm also speaking as a hunter, father of hunter, and hopefully one day grandfather of hunters. But it's focused over on the western side of Wyoming is where all the feed grounds are. And so there's a big concern over there, but this would have a major ripple effect across the whole state of Wyoming. When you reduce, if you have to reduce numbers of elk by the numbers that would happen if feed grounds were closed, the hunting opportunities in Wyoming are going to feel the pain. So I stand very much in support of this, not only as an outfitter, but as a hunter, and I would stand for any questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, gentlemen. Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you so much. Please raise your hand again if you'd like to testify. We'll go with this young lady here. Identify yourself for the record and welcome.
Chairwoman Ellis, members of the committee, I'm Jessie Johnson. I'm with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I just wanted to raise a couple of questions around this bill. I think as a federation, I can say verbatim, we do not support the immediate closure of feed grounds, but we do see sort of the pathway ahead of us when we are looking at this intersection between chronic wasting disease and brucellosis and how they kind of work against each other as something that's very concerning. A couple of the questions I have here is sort of around the need of this bill, because the Game and Fish has started a very collaborative, incredibly detailed program and look into this issue already, but we're only on phase 2. We haven't even gone through this whole sort of plan that they are leading just to educate the public, start getting ideas at the table to start looking at this at a larger way. A couple of things I wanted to touch on is that sportsmen fund feed grounds in a huge amount. I myself had an elk tag over in the Scab Creek area and had to buy a special management permit to help fund the damages caused and fund feed grounds. But landowners are also eligible for a additional reimbursement for further damage in these areas. So we end up funding it twice, which we're happy to, but we want to start looking at fixes to this problem as well. I think the other side of this is that we're putting in statute and we're codifying a pretty rigid sort of thing. Yes, the Game and Fish already does this. They do an amazing job at reaching out to stakeholders, and they reach far outside the 2 stakeholders that are named in this bill. They reach out and they bring in counties, they bring in other folks that are at this table that will be very, very affected should a feed ground close or should we talk about this. This bill is only codifying 2 of those stakeholders. So I have a little, question around it. I think if this passes, it won't be catastrophic. I think it'll be fine, but I just wonder why we're putting into a very rigid statute and sort of shackling this process to sort of administration pendulum swing when we have a very flexible, very well-led and very inclusive process that the Game and Fish has been leading. And I just stand in support of the work that they are doing and the leadership that they have demonstrated on it, as well as with how they reach out to their other stakeholders. They don't lead this alone. They make sure that other folks are at the table. And I'm just curious about putting this in statute.
Questions for Ms. Johnson? Seeing none, I have a few. So I think one comment would be, I'm sure you're familiar with the National Environmental Policy Act, which lays out a very clear process of how federal agencies have to determine environmental impacts.
Mhm.
And that process provides assurance that there will be certain safeguards so that agencies engage with the public. So my thinking is that's what this is intended to provide, is that assurance that these decisions won't be made without including stakeholders. So, you know, one of my preferences as a chair and as a legislator is if you have suggestions that you want to broaden the
Mhm.
language, if you want them to engage in more stakeholders, feel free to provide us language at the hearing so we can consider that and work that in advance is always great so we can consider it overnight. So is there a part in this bill, like page, line number, where you think that we could tweak the language?
You know, I will come back to you with something, and in the future, I will do it in future. But I don't have anything off the top of my head. My concern was more with that I know that there are more at the table right now than just the two in this bill. I don't have off the top of my head how I can list them for you or a page number without taking up too much time getting up to date on that.
Well, we look forward to your follow-up. And I think, you know, just again, I'm not familiar with this bill. I'm not one of the sponsors, but it seems that they targeted to, you know, recognized entities. And sometimes it's difficult to say entities that necessarily aren't recognized in our statutes. So if you have ideas, let us know. But thank you for your testimony.
Absolutely. And
any
thank
questions?
you.
Okay. Who else would like to testify on this bill? Mr. McGagna. Welcome, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim McGaggan with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. I would just emphasize that the existence of the elk feed grounds in northwestern Wyoming has been responsible for unparalleled development of elk herds and hunting opportunities that would not have existed otherwise. And at the same time, for very sustainable ranching operations that could not have existed had it not been for the feed ground. So it's been a win-win on both sides. And I think the real importance of this legislation, the ranching community in northwestern Wyoming has an outstanding relationship with the Wyoming Game and Fish, and we've worked closely together. I don't think the concern here is so much what the Game and Fish might do as it is strengthening their ability to deal with threats, particularly from the federal land agencies in closing these feed grounds. And we feel very strongly that by raising the profile of this issue, by putting final decisions in the hands of the governor, it's not intended to change those decisions, but rather to ensure that the state is in a stronger position when they're dealing with the potential, whether it be through litigation or just through agency policy and decision-making by the federal agencies of closing these important feed grounds. So for that reason, in particular, we would strongly urge support for this bill.
Thank you. Questions from committee members? Seeing none, do you think, Mr. McGagna, that there's been a shift, and I just don't know the weeds, I think on a national level, we're all following certain issues and the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. Do you have any insight that you can share with us about potential, is this on their radar, or do you think that this new presidential administration will change course or have a different policy objective than prior administrations?
Madam Chair, I really don't have any insight. I would say I have some fear of what could happen. We've been trying to define this 30 by 30 initiative that the president has announced. And in terms of protecting 30% of the land, we don't yet know what that means, but I could certainly envision a scenario where they would say, well, feeding elk populations on these federal lands is not a natural process, and therefore it's contrary to a broad goal like that. But I can't say that that's the fact, as I said here today, but it certainly is a fear.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Senator Landon?
Madam Chairman, thank you. We could spend all morning. What an interesting topic. And like the director of the Game and Fish told us, it's one of the biggest challenges in North America. But I had to share with you, Mr. McGagna, years ago, I had an opportunity to visit with a gentleman named Lester Pape from the Pape Ranches up in Daniel. He came in around the turn of the century up in that part of the country. It was fascinating to hear him talk about the elk herds. There really weren't that many elk back in 1900. And those that did exist would migrate all the way down where you find the great solar panel field now, down toward Green River and out into the flats. And it was just fascinating to hear him. He had such reverence for the wildlife. But then I think about what we're dealing with today and trying to make good policy. And I think of guys like Lester Pape, who started those ranches and knew that we had to do something to make that a symbiotic relationship. And like you said, Mr. McGagnon, it's really worked well for the ranching industry and for wildlife concerns. Just had to share that with you.
Thank you, Senator.
All righty. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. McGagnon. Who else in the audience would like to testify? Let's go with this young lady right here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. My name is Hunter Petch. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. We stand in support of this bill for many of the reasons, as my constituents have said. This simply codifies the process that the Game and Fish already does, and it's a fantastic process. We believe that it helps gives them protection as well. It also provides an opportunity for public participation and for people that are directly impacted by the proposed closure, which we believe promotes transparency within this process. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pitch. Any questions from committee members? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's go with the young gentleman back there. I don't know why I use qualifiers like by your age. Come on, Ken.
Thank you for the young gentleman part of it. Excuse me, Madam Chair, Ken Hamilton with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. We support this bill too. I think it's important to realize that this is somewhat of a Hobson's choice for the department, the Game and Fish Department, because when they do have to close one of these feed grounds unnecessarily, it's really going to push those animals onto private land. And that's going to have a tremendous impact on those landowners up there. So I think that's why that's so particularly important that they reach out to the Wyoming Livestock Board, which is in charge of animal diseases in the state of Wyoming. And we know we have the issue with brucellosis there. And so I think that part of it is particularly important. Maybe just a little bit of a history. I used to have hair, and back when I had hair, the Game and Fish Commission and department probably didn't get along as well with landowners as they do now. I think in the recent past, the Game and Fish Department has made tremendous strides in working with landowners. And I think it shows by how well landowners work with the Game and Fish Department. Having said that, we don't want to forget our history. And just like we've got a history of we've fed these animals and they've kind of become accustomed to the lifestyle, this also could change. And so by having this particular piece of legislation, I think it would prevent any maybe going back to the history we had prior to the Game and Fish Department working so close. I would like to say, though, that the Game and Fish Department has done an amazing job, in my opinion, in trying to address this issue, particularly as it relates to brucellosis. They've done a lot of work to try and disperse those elk when transmission can be the greatest. They've done a lot of work on studying it. So it's really been a tremendous partnership. And again, looking back to the way things used to be, I would really hate to see things go back that way. So, Madam Chair, unless there's any questions, that's all I really have.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Questions from committee members? Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Hamilton, you mentioned the department, but it strikes me that your membership and all those landowners, it's been a two-way process, hasn't it? I mean, I think there's been a lot of work from the other direction too, to try to do all they can to help the Game and Fish. I think it's going to take everybody, and really appreciate your comments this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Hamilton, we talk about impacts to landowners, and I think the department touched on this, but I'm sure you're familiar briefly. What happens when you have wildlife that feeds on your crops, your stored crops, your hay. There's a process for that, if I'm not mistaken, and an arbitration, and the state can be liable for some of the cost of making those landowners whole. Can you do you have any knowledge that you can share with us on that process?
Madam Chair, yes. The Game and Fish Department will compensate landowners for damage, and I think it's extraordinary damage to grass by big game animals. So what happens in a situation like this, though, is when those livestock are on the feed grounds and the elk don't have anything, they're going to come onto that. And so I think there would be somewhat of a challenge trying to separate these out. Well, what did the elk eat and what did the cows eat? So you add a little complexity there. But I think that it's something, though, that probably maybe precipitated the Game and Fish at one time to start doing some of this too, is that, they can buy the hay and feed their animals. The livestock people raise the hay and feed their animals. It just, I think, helps keep things a little more cordial.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any other questions? Alrighty, who else in the audience would like to testify? Seeing none, how about we go online? Is there anyone in the waiting room?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Ms. Gunther and Mr. True.
Okay, we'll go with Ms. Gunther first. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Kristen Gunther. I'm with the Wyoming Outdoor Council. I will keep my comments brief. I will say just quickly that many of our interest in the bill was adequately explained by earlier testimony. And I guess I would just say that our interest would be also following along with further conversation to ensure that this process isn't tied too narrowly, limiting the Game and Fish's ability to work with a range of stakeholders. So we would look forward to that conversation as well. That's been our interest in the bill. And ensuring that Game and Fish, which already has the authority to do this work, can continue with its good work and good outreach in reaching a diversity of stakeholders on this issue. On the bill, there are a couple of places that I wanted to mention specifically for committee consideration. One is on page 3, lines 4 to 5, and that is the section concerning public meetings. And in that part of the bill, it specifies that there are 2 bodies responsible for calling, coordinating, compiling comments for those public meetings, which would be the Game and Fish Commission and the Livestock Board. And just a small amendment for the committee to consider so that the authority and responsibility is clear in that section. Perhaps considering making that responsibility of the Wyoming Game and Fish in consultation with the Livestock Board, so that some of those more administrative details around scheduling, compiling comments, rather than splitting responsibility, which maybe adds a lack of clarity there, there's one party that's responsible for getting those procedural steps done. So that's one suggestion. And the second place that I would point to in the bill for committee consideration is on page 4, that entire section D, about reports to TRW in the event that any of the federal partners involved are going to cease permitting feeding. In that report to TRW, it might be good to consider asking the agency to discuss estimated costs of any contingency plans, just because, especially if we're talking about moving onto private lands, there could be a really considerable cost associated with leases or any moving operations, any of that. And that might be a really good discussion for this committee to have, especially since, again, there are so many stakeholders in this process that any of the logistics and especially cost might be good for this body to consider. I will leave my comments there for now. Thank you for the opportunity. I will sit for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gunther. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
And who else is on the waiting room?
We have Mr. True, and then we also have Mr. Lambert.
Oh, okay, Mr. True, welcome.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Steve True, Director at the Wyoming Livestock Board. I think testimony has described the bill and the codification that Director Nesvik referred to is exactly what I would mention too, and also would like to make note that this is the process that the Game and Fish Commission and the Livestock Board carries through for determination of borders of the designated surveillance area, which is where we maintain our brucellosis program in the northwest corner of the state. So In order of brevity, Madam Chairman, I would answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Questions from committee members? Mr. True, you just heard the prior speaker talk about maybe a suggestion on page 3 of making the commission in consultation with the livestock board. And in my opinion, that seems to be a good suggestion. Our federal counterparts, they usually identify a lead agency to lead processes. I was wondering, I know that was just presented to you, but do you have a thought about a possible amendment of making you the commission in consultation with the Wyoming Livestock Board? That suggestion, I'd just be curious to know your thoughts.
Madam Chairman, we would have no issue with that amendment there. That's kind of the way the process would work anyway. That would be triggered through the commission and the department and come to us, and then Director Nesbitt and I will have to try to herd a bunch of cats into one room at one time to get that done.
Okay, any other questions from committee members? Maybe along those lines, you heard the other suggestion on page 4 about providing estimated cost of contingency plans. Do you think that language is necessary, or just kind of wanted your feedback on that suggestion?
Madam Chairman, I think I would probably defer an answer to that question to Director Nesbitt rather than the Livestock Board.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Livestock Board? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. True, for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And then I think we may have one more participant online. Is that correct?
Correct. Mr. Lambert, can you please turn your video and audio on? I think he's having connectivity issues, Madam Chair, because he keeps coming in and out. How would you like to proceed? He's not in the waiting room anymore.
Great question. How about we give him a few more minutes? I'm going to close public comment for everyone else except Mr. Lambert. If he's able to get on board, we will accommodate him. But for other than that, we'll close public testimony and start working this bill.
Okay.
All righty. Public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
I'll move the bill.
The bill's been moved by Senator Landon. Discussion? Committee members? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would go ahead and make that motion to add the amendment on page 3 after commission, add in consultation with the Wyoming Livestock Board. I think that's a good catch.
Thank you. Senator Schuler, would it be a friendly amendment if we delete the word and said the commission in consultation with the Wyoming Livestock Board
Sure.
shall conduct?
Sure. That would be friendly.
All righty.
Yes.
Is there a motion on the amendment? Oh, it's been moved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The amendment has passed. Any other potential amendments from the committee? Senator Landon?
Madam Chairman, I would go to line 14 on page 4. The sentence that reads currently, the report required by this subsection shall include draft contingency plans. After the word include, I would move to include the following language: include associated potential costs and draft contingency plans. So the report required by this subsection shall include associated potential costs and draft contingency plans.
Senator Landon, would you view this as a friendly amendment if I suggested that instead of on line 14, we added on line 15 after the word plans? So it said shall include draft contingency plans, including associated potential costs.
I think that's where I intended that to be.
Oh,
Madam
okay.
Chairman. Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman or Mr. Co-Chair on another committee. That sounds great. Don, did you get that amendment? Perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I
Okay.
think that is a better spot.
And it's been moved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The amendment's passed. Any other amendments that we'd like to include in this bill? Seeing none? Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Senator Guru is excused. Senator Landon,
Aye.
Senator Salazar, Senator Schuler, Chairwoman Ellis, 4 ayes, 1 excused.
And we will visit with Senators Baldwin, Driscoll, and Hicks to see if any of them would like to manage this on the floor, but we certainly have a lot of information and we'll work to support it. Thank you so much. As we transition to our next bill up, which is House Bill 122, welcome. We've got two representatives in the audience, Representative Western and Representative Nyman. Oh, well, welcome. Sorry, we didn't acknowledge you sooner. I thought you were going to testify on this bill. Just wanted to clarify for committee members, Senator Grew, as you know, sits on the Appropriations Committee. And so he is very good about communicating with me his schedule and his plan. So I do know that, I just want the public to know that he has other obligations and that's why we're missing him today. Welcome, Representative Western, and walk us through House Bill 122.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the committee and talk about this issue. So this is House Bill 122, and I'm going to try to hit the two main rules when presenting a bill, and that is what problem does it solve and how does it solve it? And the problem is this. In the hunting public, one of the top things that is always of discussion is public access. And right now in Wyoming, there's about 3 million acres of either state or federal land that is landlocked by private land. So access is a really big deal. And so how does this bill solve it? What it simply does is it uses the conservation stamp as a vehicle to generate money that Game and Fish has to use to fund their access programs. So Game and Fish currently has Access Yes, and the two specific programs within it are hunter management areas, HMAs, and walk-ins. And so the way it currently works is, or the process now works is, Game and Fish approaches a landowner and kind of starts that conversation about getting access. And so the tools we have are very effective in terms of providing a lot of flexibility and options for the landowner, especially through the HMA process. The landowner can say what species they want to allow hunters on for. Maybe it's the first half of the season or the second half, or rifle only, or archery only, all these kind of things. And it also allows them to name the price that they're comfortable with. And if you kind of look at the process now, the one component in the equation that's really been missing is just a lack of funding. And the Access Yes, quite frankly, just doesn't really pay much right now. I mean, it's pennies on the dollar, to be quite honest. And that's not a fault of Game and Fish. It's just they're trying to do the best they can with the funds that they currently have. And it's not a lot. And so what this bill would do is really generate those funds to kind of get those kind of access agreements that hunters have. And I think this bill strikes a really good balance between respecting private property rights, which of course is sacrosanct, but also ensuring a mechanism that hunters have a way to get that access in a way that landowners can consent to and find agreeable. I think kind of the genesis is, I can't tell you how many times I've sat around the campfire and the conversation comes around public access, and hunters love to gripe about the lack thereof. So this bill, in large part, is a way for hunters to, quite frankly, put their money where their mouth is and say, hey, I'm willing to pay for that access. So that's kind of the gist behind this. I think, if you go up and you ask any hunter on the streets of Wyoming and say, hey, list some of the top issues in regards to hunting that are important to you, almost without exception, they're going to say public access is one of the top priorities. And I think if there's one stat that kind of captures how significant this is, about 95% of hunters rely on public lands for successful harvest. So we have this incredible legacy in Wyoming, this really rich tradition of being sportsmen, of hunting and fishing. And that public land is a really important part of ensuring that gets passed on down through the generations. It continues to be a really incredible experience for folks across the state and, quite frankly, across the country who come to Wyoming every fall to enjoy this incredible bounty that we have here in state. So I'm trying to be concise for the committee, so I stand by for any questions if you guys do have any. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Questions for Representative Western?
Madam Chair.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Representative Weston, can you tell me what the stamp fee is now and what would be the proposed increase in the stamp fee?
Representative Western.
Chairwoman. Senator Salazar. So right now it's about $12, $12.50, and it's raising it to $21. And I certainly understand that that's not an insignificant increase, but I think it's indicative of how important this issue is to hunters and how they're really willing to pony up if they want more access. Because again, this is kind of one of the bloodline of ensuring that this really amazing tradition we have moves forward. And I will say that, there's been a lot of broad support from some of the major brands in the hunting industry, whether it be in the firearms component or the hunting, gear, they've all expressed support publicly, whether it be through a press release and from nonprofits and some of the associations we have here in Wyoming that advocate for wildlife, to just average hunters. And I think there's a couple here. They're here to testify to show that this bill is important and it really does drive, move the ball forward for the hunting public.
Further questions, Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative, thank you. Nice work on the bill. Can you talk a little bit about Romanet 2I and that 15% that would be used for other things? What was the conversation over on your side of the building, and what was your thinking on carving out that 15%?
Representative Western?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Landon, kind of the thought process behind that was the other component for hunting or for hunters is healthy habitat, healthy wildlife, and robust, strong herd numbers, whether it be antelope or elk or what have you. And certainly, especially when it comes to mule deer and other species, some of their herd numbers have been declining statewide and in certain parts of the state, in large part because there are mechanisms in place that would really help these herds, whether it be migration corridors, and as it says here, they have some of these conservation efforts, whether it be game fencing, highway underpasses, and these are really important to ensure we have these healthy herds across the state. And the reality is these devices, these structures are not cheap to build, and so this is a way that hunters can divert, up to 15% of this revenue to generate for some of these kind of mechanisms, whether it be underpasses or fish ladders, stuff like that sportsmen rely on for successful outings.
Appreciate that, Madam Chairman.
Follow up?
Just a quick follow-up. Representative, any estimates as to what you think this might generate? What are we looking at totals?
Representative Western?
Chairwoman, Senator, so this would generate right around 1.6 million, right in that ballpark on an annual basis. And it gives, if you look at the engrossed version, it kind of gives Game and Fish the leeway and kind of the time they need to get enough access or leads for access agreements in the pipe before they can finally commit to an agreement.
Further questions for Representative Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When I first read this bill, I hate to say this because it sounds really picky, but I wondered why you came up with the figure of $21. Was there any particular reason for that? I thought to myself, you have $20 makes more sense to me, but having an extra $8 to do all the things that you've talked about that are important, I think. I just wondered what the reasoning was behind that.
Sure.
Representative Western?
Other than the fact that I was 21 when I shot my first mule deer with my bow. No, in part it was kind of that middle ground of a significant enough or generates enough to really have the kind of money necessary to pay these landowners. Because some of them I've engaged with have said, I'd be willing to come to the table, but you just can't really pay me much. And if I'm going to give access, I need to be paid what it's worth, especially if it's really high quality habitat that is high quality game on it. So that was kind of the broad process. So 21 exactly, I couldn't give you a specific reason, but just kind of in that ballpark to generate the funds necessary to really move the needle on this.
Thank you. Maybe along those lines, Representative Western, when you purchase a conservation stamp, I know we had a big discussion about fingerprinting fees, and our county requires exact dollars that you pay with. So that is one kind of question is with the 21, does that create a little bit of a problem where you can't just slap a 20 down and have, or do you need to have that dollar? Or can you just buy that with electronically, just so we're aware?
Madam Chairwoman, certain, obviously to sell tags, conservation stamps, things like that, they have to be registered with Game and Fish, but almost every single time I've ever purchased one, they always take credit cards or stuff like that at whether it's Sportsman's Warehouse or Walmart or one of the Game and Fish regional offices. So,
and then any other questions from committee members? I do have one question. I think Senator Landon raises a good point about the wildlife corridors, crossings, underpasses, overpasses. I can think of one senator in particular who's not a fan of these particular structures. And so I think the question will be that we'll need to be prepared to address on the floor is, we have the Wildlife Trust that allocates a large number of money for projects like that. Now we've got this. How do those two entities exist when it comes to identifying projects it wants to fund? Are there opportunities for these funds to mix with those funds? I'm just kind of curious how you envision a carve out here working with the trust.
Madam Chairwoman, that's an excellent question. I think this is something that these funds will be collected by Game and Fish, held in account and used in consultation. They use in consultation with the trust in identifying some of these specific areas where, whether it be antelope or deer or whatever it is, at these crossing points. And it's done in consultation with Game and Fish Trust, and of course with YDOT as well, because usually it's crossing some sort of state highway. So those are kind of the three entities that work collaboratively, both in terms of where they go, the design of them, and of course the funding here in this specific case. And I certainly will let Game and Fish speak more specifically on that. But that's kind of the broad framework. So
great, thank you. Any further questions for our good sponsor here? Thank you. Director Nesbitt, I'm guessing you'd like to offer some comments on this bill. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The good bringer of the bill did an excellent job of outlining many of the things that I would have talked about. So I won't repeat things that he said. I will talk a little bit about your last question regarding how wildlife crossings around the state are funded. And currently there's multiple partners that come together. The trust is certainly one of the biggest funders of our current crossing projects, but there are other funders out there, some of them represented here in this room from conservation organizations around the state that either sponsor, do the fundraising themselves, or promote different entities to come together to fund these things. We've recently funded a very large crossing project over south of Big Piney, and they're extremely expensive. Putting in underpasses and erecting fences are expensive. That project ended up being $21 million. And there was a significant federal contribution through a build grant, as well as WWNRT contributions, as well as Game and Fish Commission, Transportation Commission, and private entities as well. So it's kind of this would place more contribution that would come directly from sportsmen. That's the way I would view the allocation in this bill specific to crossings. Currently we spend about $1 million a year on our Access Yes program. Representative Western's exactly right. This would raise a total of about 1.6 million. And, obviously the significant portion of that would be allocated to Access. So it would significantly improve the program. We currently have the two programs that Representative Western talked about. But in addition to that, we oftentimes find these single easement projects that are, really kind of fit into what the ideas presented in this bill are. One example close to here is there's an access road that goes through private land for 3 to 4 miles right off of I-80 at Arlington. And through an access agreement there with the Pitchers and the Brokaws, we've been able to secure public access up to tens of thousands of acres of national forests that are otherwise difficult to access. You have to come from a different way. We've got easements on some of our streams and rivers around the state that have been in place since the 60s that are just phenomenal. I mean, they're long-term access agreements that provide anglers and hunters, hundreds of miles of access. So there's been some great opportunities over time. It's not a new issue, as Representative Western talked. I hear from sportsmen every day about this issue. So it's certainly important to our constituents. With that, I can't hear it in this committee room, but there's a fire alarm in the Capitol. So my email says, please proceed to the northwest corner of the That concludes my testimony, Madam Chair.
We have no questions. We'll do it. Please proceed to the northwest corner, evidently.
Madam Chair, I'll just leave the Zoom up for when you guys come back.
That's perfect. Thank you.
We'll just leave it running in the background.
Okay, thank you. All righty, LSO, we're back in the room. And Director Nesbitt was just finishing up his testimony. I believe Senator Salazar, without missing a beat, had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Director, we're going from the stamp fee of $12.50 to $21. Do you support that?
Director Nesbitt?
Madam Chair, Senator Salazar, we support any additional funding for access. The specific amount, I don't really have a perspective on. Senator or Representative Western and I talked about that. I felt like it was a reasonable amount.
So you do,
Follow up, Senator Salazar?
thank you, Madam Chair. So you do support it?
Madam Chair, Senator Salazar, yes.
Okay, any other questions for the director? It's Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, not to bog anything down today, but I'd love to know a little bit more about the Access Yes program. And if we're going to more than double the opportunity for that program, I just wonder if you've got a big whiteboard that, here's the priority list, or how does that work? How are we going to identify walk-in areas and access areas that would be the most beneficial?
Director Nesbitt.
Madam Chair, Senator Landon. So the way we would approach this, it's focused on a new type of access. It's focused on accessing difficult to access public lands. The other part of our access program right now is largely around securing access on private land, to actually hunt on private land. This focuses on access through private land to get to public lands that are difficult to access. So the way we would do that, the way we'd develop a priority list is I would ask all of our field offices, our field supervisors to go out and look at where those opportunities exist. And we'd develop a priority list. I will tell you that as I see this happening practically on the ground, just knowing how some of these other access easements have been developed, it does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of coordination because sometimes access through one private landowner has an effect on other private landowners. And so, it would need to be a public outreach as well as outreach with the neighbors. And then there's a lot of legal requirements. The other thing too would be that all of these acquisitions go through another formal public process because the commission approves any property right acquisition, whether it's a lease, an easement, or an actual purchase of fee title. So there would be another public process and the commission would ultimately make a decision on which projects were funded.
Director, thank you. All of that was really helpful.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Alrighty, further questions for Director Nesbitt? Seeing none, just wanted to get a sense of how many people are on the online meeting. If you could raise your hand, and if there are any state agency directors, I apologize, I haven't been doing a good job of letting you speak first. Are there any state director or state agency folks on the line? Well, with that, we'll wait to hear. Who in the public would like to speak on this bill? I see 3-4 hands up. So we'll do the same thing that we did before, about 5 minutes each. So we'll start with Ms. Johnson.
And Madam Chair, you have 7 people on Zoom who would like to testify.
Thank you. We will get to the online participants when we're done with the in-room public.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, again, Jesse Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I just want to start with, we are so grateful to see this bill addressing access. It's been something we hear about continually from our membership, so much so that we put it on a membership-wide survey. And our results were the specific ask that we made was, would you support a $5 to $10 fee increase to fund access? Like, that was what we asked. 75% of our 3,000 Wyoming members said yes, 24% said need more info, and only 1 person said no. Just one report of no. So we are in really strong support of this bill. I also want to mention a letter of support from other sporting groups around the state that you have in front of you. Some of them, Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Mule Deer Foundation, Western Bear Foundation, Wyoming Chapter, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Trout Unlimited, Muley Fanatic Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Water for Wildlife Foundation, and the One Shot Antelope Hunt. That's a huge section of hunting groups and people that support hunters around the state saying, yes, we want to pay for this. This is absolutely something that is necessary to our hunting heritage in the state. I also wanted to mention, you asked earlier about a fee increase. It's a $9, $8.50 to $9 increase. I spend that on a cold beer after a hunt. And this is only the ask is once a year on a conservation license. And it doesn't change the cost of the lifetime conservation stamps. It's just talking about the one you buy annually. We fall right in the middle between Utah. If you were to say do a deer hunt in Utah, it's about $74 for the deer tag and a $34 habitat stamp. South Dakota, on the other side, a non-resident habitat stamp is 25. So that 21 is pretty regular for what you see across the other Western states on how they deal with this. I wanted to mention the good work of the Game and Fish and how they have run this Access Yes program. You also have in front of you a map provided by Game and Fish that is covering sort of all of their work on Access Yes throughout the state. I think this does a really great job of showing that this isn't just a Eastern Wyoming issue, although it would benefit Eastern Wyoming a lot where we see a lot of access issues. This also crosses the western side of the state as well. And so it's benefiting everyone. I think when you look at it, Access Yes has opened up just through what they've done about 2.6 million acres in their reports. And that's through many different agreements. Again, as Director Nesvik stated earlier, this is looking at public, landlocked or hard to access public land. TRCP, the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, did an incredible study. They came up with the number that Wyoming has 3 million acres of that landlocked. We're actually the highest in the country for that. So we have a lot of access issues and a lot of opportunity to do some really good work for a very minimal fee increase. I won't sort of belabor that point. We stand in incredible strong support. We're very thankful to the sponsor of this bill and the co-sponsors as well. And we ask for a yes vote.
Awesome. Questions for Ms. Johnson? Seeing none, thank you for participating. Oh, sorry, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I wondered, I like the fact that you did a survey with your folks. I wondered, have you reached out to very many of the private landowners to talk to them about their thoughts on this?
Ms. Johnson?
Chairwoman, Senator Schuler, yes, we have. We've had some discussions. We actually have an op-ed that has yet to be placed by one of them that is in favor of this. And he is in the Douglas area. Without that op-ed publishing, I don't want to say who he is, but we have talked with a lot. Obviously, it's always going to be hit and miss. We really, one thing I would say is part of what we love about Access Yes is they have a enhanced enforcement program that is paired with many different counties that when you are a landowner that enters into these deals for Access Yes, they help the enforcement to help make sure that the hunters using this are abiding and behaving well and being good representatives of the hunting community, as I know sometimes can be an issue. But I really love the program that they've started there. I'm sure we'll see more of it, the more funding that goes up. Again, you know, this fee increase can really touch on all of those things and make sure that we are giving the landowners a fair compensation for the incredible gift of access that they're willing to enter into a deal with. And again, it's voluntary for the landowners. So this isn't forcing anyone. We wouldn't be in support of that.
Further questions for Ms. Johnson? Seeing none, thank you for your participation today. Who
Thank
else in
you.
the audience would like to testify? We'll do Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ken Hamilton with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Madam Chair, we don't really have, I would say we have a little bit of heartburn in a couple of places on this bill. And thankfully there was a fire alarm, so I was able to visit with a couple of the individuals to maybe offer a suggestion. But from our standpoint, the access issue, purchasing the access is the first part. Providing enforcement to make sure that the public doesn't abuse that access is the next part. And that's the one part of this bill that I think is a little bit lacking. So I'm going to propose a suggested amendment, but I think in our discussions with our members, that is one of the things that comes up. they get the access and the public's aware of it. But the game and fish is stretched pretty thin. And so there's a lot of issues where the public comes on across those access areas. They maybe have a narrow easement to go, drive down this road, but the snowdrift comes in and they pull over, and they, there's these kind of things. Most of those, a lot of those aren't fenced. Some of them, they'll say, don't bring dogs, and people will come out and turn their dogs loose. So with your indulgence, I would like to suggest on page 2, line 13, a simple little suggestion, and it certainly could be improved on, I'm sure, but on lines 13, it says for the purchase or enforcement, just add that or enforcement of access easements, and then just let it go on through there. And Madam Chair, the reason I suggest it there is when I had the brief conversation with Director Nesvik, I think that this would give them flexibility. If they don't have the staff that they can be out there doing that, they can talk to the county sheriff or whomever, and perhaps get some law enforcement folks out there, particularly during some critical times. So, Madam Chair, that's really all I have. Be happy to answer any questions if they're easy ones. Senator Landon.
Questions for Mr. Hamilton? Mr. Hamilton, did you visit with Representative Western about the suggested amendment?
I did, and I'm afraid that it was when we were walking back in here, and I kind of hit him cold with it. I would like to say that Senator or Representative Western did reach out to us early on, and we do really appreciate that. He talked with my colleague Brett Moline, and so he's really done a good job in trying to reach out and address these. So I hit him a little cold with it, as I did Director Nesvik. So they may have some thoughts on that as well, and I understand that.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any questions from the committee? Senator Landon?
Madam Chairman, just real quickly, Ken, I wonder about the or as opposed to and. I realize that I bet some of the concern is that we don't have enough staff to cover a lot of this stuff, but it seems to me that these easements, if you put an or in there, doesn't that single out a lot of properties that you could just say, well, we're just not going to enforce them? Help me with the thinking on the or.
Mr. Hamilton, I'll confess I had the same question.
Yeah, well, and I will say that I would have no trouble with, if I put in and, I'm not sure it quite reads right, but I think we could make that work. I do agree, Senator Landon, that I think and would be more appropriate, but I'm not the best at some of these amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Who else in the audience would like to speak? See my friend Cody, come on up and introduce yourself at the microphone.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank
Welcome.
you. My name is Cody Dalton. I'm speaking as a hunter today, and also represent Wyoming Wildlife Federation, Bow Hunters of Wyoming, heavily involved with Hunting with Heroes, and then the Women's Antelope Hunt. I would just like to speak on behalf of a couple of those: Wyoming Wildlife Federation, Bow Hunters of Wyoming, and Hunting with Heroes. I love to hunt, but my bigger passion is taking others out who would otherwise have the opportunity. And I just love what this will create with further opportunity with that. And with that said, landowners are all pretty gracious as it is, but I love that they will be, maybe compensated more for this. So that makes me very happy. Also, just speaking on behalf of a hunter myself and the fees, I think I would be more than happy to pay, an increased fee. I was just in Game and Fish the other day paying for my bear license and conservation stamp, and I give them a 50, and then I always give them the change, and I say, use the rest to donate to Access Yes anyway. So I kind of like the $21 because they are paying with cash. Maybe there is an opportunity to I think that happens a lot. So I know I do it every year. And so I just want to thank everyone for being here and for listening. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Questions for my friend Cody here? Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
You too.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify? Yes, sir. Come onto the mic.
Madam Chairman, thank you for your time this morning. My name is Neil Perkins. I'm the Vice President of the Bow Hunters of Wyoming. I'm a board member of the local Cheyenne Field Archers here that has around 260 members at the time. Both organizations are in favor of this bill. Not only are we in favor of this bill, but we've been supporting the Access Yes program and the hunter management programs for the last 17 years. Bow Hunters of Wyoming donates approximately $2,000 a year towards this program, and the Cheyenne Field Archers holds a benefit shoot once a year, and they raise anywhere between $1,200 and $1,800 a year for this program. So to say that this is an important program and this funding is needed is an understatement to sportsmen here in Wyoming. One of the things I mentioned Bow Hunters of Wyoming, I mentioned the Cheyenne Field Archers. When we donate that money goes out to the sportsmen. Fishermen benefit from it, bird hunters benefit from it, bow hunters benefit from it, rifle hunters benefit from it. There's a large gamut of people that benefit from this access. And it will take the opportunity to take thousands of acres and turn it into maybe millions of acres that is accessible to people to recreate in. So with that, I'll leave the questions to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Is it Perkins? you said?
Perkins.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony today. And I think that's it for public comment. Is that correct? Or excuse me, that in person. Anyone else in the audience like to speak? Seeing none, let's look at the Zoom. If you can raise your hand and our LSO staff will start admitting you in to testify. I believe we had 7 people. Committee members, just for reference, it's 9:26. I would like to see if we can finish working this bill today.
All right, members of the public, can you please turn on your video and your microphone and be ready to testify so Chairman Ellis can call on you, please? And there's a few more. It looks like there might be closer to 9 or 10. I'm all promoting them right now.
Okay, I'm having a hard time seeing your name, so but we'll start with Mr. Cole. I do see you.
Chairman Ellis, members of the committee, my name is Nephi Cole. I hope you can hear me. I am the Director of Government Relations and State Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We're the Firearms Trade Association of America. Our members are the 9,000 manufacturers, retailers, and distributors of firearms, firearms components, and accessories in the United States of America. I'm here to testify on behalf of our members in favor of this bill. And we have a very soft spot for these issues. A lot of people don't know that about 11% of the things that we manufacture, an 11% tax called Pittman and Robertson, goes to fund wildlife habitat and conservation across the United States. So in Wyoming, that amounts to somewhere around $15 million on the average year. We think that the future of hunting and the shooting sports is critically important. The number one impediment to people participating in hunting and the shooting sports is access. In 1982, there were 17 million hunters in this country. In 2016, that number dropped to 11.5 million. Currently, about 4.9% of Americans hunt, about 5%. That number's dropped by a full percentage since 2010. Interestingly enough, in 2020, we had the largest sales year in the history of the firearms industry. We saw 10 million first-time gun owners. And with that, we also were fortunate to get 1 million new or returning hunters in this last year, in the year 2020. We think that's absolutely phenomenal. But in order to make those people stay, in order to keep them in the hunting and shooting sports, they need to have places to go and do those things. We think this bill does a great job of accomplishing that. Would like to note that the conservation stamp, that amount has been set in statute for some time. It is not indexed to inflation. So while this amount of increase might seem like it's a large increase, when you look at the last time the conservation stamp bumped up its numbers, I would suggest that this isn't actually that big of an increase. It may actually be less now, even with the increase, than it was at the time that the amount was set. I don't want to jeopardize a phenomenal bill by suggesting that it do be indexed to inflation in this bill, but we want to commend Representative Western, and all those who are supporting this bill and carrying it forward. We want you to know that our industry strongly supports these opportunities.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, I have a question. Do you have the date of when the last time the conservation stamp amount was updated?
I don't have that in front of me. I discussed it with Mr. Western some time ago, but I did not make a note of it when we visited about it. So I apologize for that.
We'll get that information. Thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Cole? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I see Mr. Gregory. Welcome. Turn on your mic and then identify yourself for the hearing.
Madam Chairwoman Ellis, members of the committee, my name is Colton Gregory and I'm coming to you guys as a hunter. In 2018, I was fortunate enough to work for the Game and Fish as a public access technician. And it really hit home why we need these HMAs. I worked primarily in the Bear River Divide. That's the biggest HMA in the state. While I was there, I helped an old man drag a deer back to his truck. And he was ecstatic that he could hunt there because he used to be a mule skinner, up in the Grays River. And he's too old, his knees hurt, can't ride a mule anymore, but he can come there and he can hunt. A couple nights later, I helped a single mom. She had 3 kids with her. She drove up from Evanston, picked them up after school, went and shot a deer, and they're on their way back. They were ecstatic. Without that HMA, these people would have to drive all the way to Kemmer because you can't access any of that public land. So I'm in full support of this bill. And I see no problem paying an extra $8.50. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Questions from committee members? Thank you for being with us today. Let's see. Let's go to Mr. Hurley.
Hi, thank you. My name's Tom Hurley, and I am the PR chair for Bow Hunters of Wyoming, and just wanted to reach out, even on the personal level, as an avid hunter and outdoorsman that sees this bill as a huge opportunity that we do not get that often as hunters to advance our sport, advance the opportunity, and just want to stand in full support of it. It's a huge deal for us. A lot of people have already touched on it, so I don't want to take too much time, but there's so much public access. It creates so much opportunity for so many people. And I'm very big, being the PR chair for Bow Hunters of Wyoming, I'm very big on social media personally and through that. And it's one of the largest issues that we find as public access as hunters in our state. And I have seen virtually no pushback on this. I know I've heard some people, but of the thousands of people I talk to, I have come across basically none. So I just wanted to voice my support, and I hope that we can pass this and create lots more opportunity for more hunters in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Hurley? Seeing none. Thank you for being with us today. I think I see a fellow named, is it Jaden Bates?
Madam Chairwoman, Jaden Bales.
Thank you. Mr. Bales, please identify yourself for the record.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jaden Bales. I'm a hunter here in Lander, Wyoming. And I'm wanting to voice my support here for this House Bill 122. Back in 2018, actually, I drew a second choice tag out in Eastern Wyoming, and in a place that has very little public access, and most of the public access are these little tiny state land chunks. And I actually ended up archery hunting most of that season so that I didn't have to contend with the Orange Army that shows up in rifle season. I know a lot of people have a hard time with that experience and therefore don't take up those opportunities as second choice. This unit in particular, Unit 20, has a 38% harvest rate for residents. The state average is 84%. These places are just hard to hunt. And I think that this House Bill 122 gives us a really great solution to provide better access, especially on that east side of the state, and allows us to have better opportunities by spreading out these hunters and these hunter pressures. So I just hope that members of the committee, you vote in favor and support of this bill, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Bales? Seeing none. Thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank
How about
you.
we go to Ms. Kaufman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name's Anna Kaufman. I'm actually also from the Lander area. I'm a recent transplant to Wyoming, and this past fall, I bought a reduced price elk tag for about $250. So it wasn't a cheap investment. And of course, I also bought my conservation stamp to go along with it. And when I was hunting that tag, I was lucky enough to utilize an HMA up in the Bighorn Basin where there's a lot of public access, but there's not a lot of public access to the kinds of quality habitat that you needed to hunt that tag. And so honestly, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to emphasize that as far as the costs that non-residents and residents put into hunting in Wyoming every year, a $9 increase is negligible when it comes with all of that extra access. It's less than half of what I spend on a box of ammo for my 308. It's really minor when you weigh it against the benefits. And so I just wanted to stand in support of this bill and make sure that we had some hunter voices on here advocating for it. So I encourage you all to vote in favor, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Kaufman? Ms. Kaufman, did you get your elk?
I did not, actually. It was a difficult year in that unit.
Thank you for testifying. We appreciate hearing from you today. I see Mr. Dobrik. Would you like to testify?
Madam Chair, Committee, good morning. Nick Dobrich from DuBois. I'm with Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and I stand in support of this bill. Even in Western Wyoming, where we're blessed with lots of public land, there's still a lot of chunks that are inaccessible. And I think about fishing on the Wind River up here. We have 7 access points that were set up a long time ago based on some of these programs that Wyoming Game and Fish has been able to foster with willing landowners. And so seeing more of these programs, not just for hunters, but also for anglers, it's really valuable. Mr. Bales talked a little bit about the crowding he's seen, and that's definitely an issue here in Wyoming. We're blessed that hunting and fishing is definitely booming here. There's a lot of places where you talk about a loss of hunters and anglers in the nation. That's not the case in Wyoming. And when we have opportunity to spread out more hunters and anglers, that experience is going to be valuable, is going to increase. Additionally, when you think about the experiences that we have with our families and friends out there in the field hunting and angling, these are priceless experiences. These are memorable. And if you put that experience and you compare it to this proposed increased price tag, I don't think it really compares very, very strongly. So I'm definitely in support of this bill, and I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Dobrich? Thank you so much for participating today. We appreciate your comments. I think I see a fellow named Mason Parkus. And
Yeah, Madam Chair.
just so you're aware on the Zoom, you're on a screen that's far away from me, and I do have 20/20, but it is really hard to see through plexiglass, multiple layers of plexiglass. So I apologize if I'm not getting your names right. Please identify yourself for the record.
No worries. Madam Chair, my name is Mason Parkus. I'm a student at University of Wyoming in Laramie. And I'm not going to take too much of your time, but I just want to say that I am in complete support of this. As a hunter, I used walk-in and HMA areas probably a dozen times last year alone. I was able to harvest my antelope on one and do some upland bird hunting out east of Sheridan. And I just love being able to access those places, especially on the eastern half of the state. Like Jaden said, we don't have as much national forest or public land. So it is really nice to be able to have areas that we can hunt. And like Ms. Johnson said earlier, I think pretty much every hunter is pretty much in favor of this bill. I think only one person on her survey said that they wouldn't pay the extra fee. So I think that speaks for itself. So yeah, I would just say that I'm in support for this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Parkus? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today. And then last on our list, we have Ms. Gunther. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Kristen Gunther from the Wyoming Outdoor Council. I don't want to take too much time, so I'll be very brief and just offer our support of this bill. We are not a sportsman's organization, but we do have a diverse membership of different user groups, including many hunters and anglers. And we speak with them regularly about the issues they face. Access comes up regularly. And I just wanted to share a reflection that often when this topic comes up, the question that I hear is, what more can I do? How can I contribute? We hear regularly from our membership that this is something that they'd love to contribute to opening up opportunities. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Gunther? Seeing none, thank you for being with us. And then is it Ms. Rose? Welcome, and please identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Liz Rose, and I represent Trout Unlimited in Wyoming. I'm testifying in support of House Bill 122. Trout Unlimited has over 1,600 members and 10 staff members in Wyoming, and collectively we volunteer over 11,000 hours each year, contributing to on-the-ground fisheries restoration and access projects. So funding for access and conservation work in Wyoming is a big deal for us. When I asked our volunteer chapter leaders and our council members about this bill, the majority were very supportive of paying an additional $9 if that will result in improved access, specifically to these difficult to access or inaccessible public lands, and to providing some more conservation funding. So $9 is the cost of a few flies for a lot of us, and we support this bill and would be happy to give Game and Fish another tool and some additional funding to help support angling and hunting throughout the state. So I thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Rose? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
So is there anyone else in the online group?
Not
that
at this, I think we got them all, Madam Chair.
Okay, with that, public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? The bill's been moved by Senator Schuler, seconded by Senator Landon.
Madam Chair, my apologies. One more person raised their hand. Would you like me to permit him?
Okay, briefly.
It's named Mr. Chambers, Tom Chambers.
Okay.
Mr. Chambers, please turn on your video and your mic and be ready to testify. He's in the room, Madam Chair. He just isn't turning on his video. Oh, here he comes.
Right, Mr. Chambers, briefly, we're trying to, we've got to get on the floor here in a little bit. We're trying to work the bill. Welcome.
Mr. Chambers, you need to unmute, please. There you go.
My name is Tom Chambers. I'm the field representative for the Wyoming chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We are in favor of this bill. Without going into any great lengths, what other people have said, this is for our benefit. We are like 3 million acres of land that we cannot access right now. And Game and Fish does a great job of trying to access a lot of places that we cannot, either through an HMA or Access Yes. So again, we are in favor of this bill. Any questions, I will stand to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, thank you for your participation today. We'll close public testimony, and we did have a motion on the bill. Discussion on the bill or any amendments? Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, I really appreciate Mr. Hamilton's thoughts with regard to the enforcement piece, but we haven't really had time today to vet that. So I would suggest that maybe we carry the bill forward if that's our inclination. And we can certainly visit about that as the bill moves through the Senate. That would be where I'd land on that one. So
Thank you. Any other comments or suggestions from committee members? On that point, Senator Landon, I'm with you. I would like to make sure I know, rather than just hastily inserting and enforcement, give it a little more thought, maybe look at different placement. But, that's something I'd be willing to look at as a committee of the whole amendment, and want to work with, obviously, the bringer of the bill to make sure he's comfortable with the language. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick comment. I want to congratulate the sponsor of the bill. It's come a long way in a hurry, and I love the testimony just now, especially from the young man who worked part-time for the Game and Fish and helped those hunters. And that was good stuff. That was just really fun. So thank you.
Yep. Any other comments from committee members? Are we ready for the question? Question's been called. Don, will you please call the roll?
Senator Guru is excused. Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Salazar.
No.
Senator Schuler. Chairwoman Ellis.
Aye.
3 ayes, 1 no, 1 excused.
Thank you. Next up on our committee agenda, we have House Bill 112 engrossed, the Pioneer Trapper License. I do see we have Representative Claussen. We could start if you aren't available to take up this issue on Thursday, but maybe we can get like 5 minutes of your testimony if you'd like. It's up to you, Representative, how you want to handle it. Okay, we'll take, how about we try and work this for at least 5 minutes and see how far we get.
All right.
Welcome.
I bring you House Bill 112. It started out lifetime Pioneer Trapper License. Now it's Pioneer Trapper License. What this does is, this came to me from a constituent who is an older gentleman who gets a trapping or fur bearing license. There was no pioneer portion in this section of law, and he'd researched it with the Game and Fish, and they told him that he had to come to his legislator. And here we are. The genesis of this bill is that it lowers the rate for anyone over 65 years old that has lived in Wyoming for over 30 years from $43 to $20. In the House Standing Committee Amendment, we stripped the lifetime because there was some confusion. So it's Pioneer Trapper's License. I may make one suggestion that we add a $sign because of the reviser's bill on page 2. And I guess with that, I'll stand for questions. It's a fairly simple bill.
Questions for Representative Claussen?
Great bill.
Senator
Madam Chair,
Salazar? Yes.
great bill. Thank
Okay.
you.
Or Senator Schuler?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just what was the original fee before you made this decision to go with the Pioneer?
Representative Claussen?
Madam Chairman, $43.
Okay.
Further questions? Seeing none, feel free to hang out and we'll let you know if we have any more questions. Director Nesbitt, did you have any comments?
Morning, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
The sponsor did a great job introducing Bill. Just some quick impact to the department. It was pretty minimal, kind of a negative impact, but as an example, qualified resident trappers last year there were 41, and at that $45 rate, there were 41. 29 of those were resident trappers, and this went back 500.
Questions for Mr. Phipps? Seeing none, thank you for being with us. Did we have anyone in the audience who wanted to testify in this bill? Ms. Johnson, and then LSO, is there anyone in the waiting room on the Zoom that would like to testify? Please have them please raise your hand if you're online and would like to testify. Ms. Johnson.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Jesse Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I'll just keep this really short. This is a very easy bill to support. We have a lot of affiliate members that are trappers in the Trappers Association. We just like to support them wherever we can. So thank you, and we support this.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Johnson? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify? Seeing none, is there anyone on the Zoom that would like to testify?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, seeing none, public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? The bill's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the bill or amendments? Committee members, I'd move 2 amendments. First, on page 2, line 3. As it reads right now, it says a Pioneer resident trapping license fur bearing in accordance with the fee. It was suggested by LSO to add some clarification on line 3. So it would read a Pioneer resident trapping license, inserting the word for fur bearing animals in accordance with the fee specified. So it would be the addition of the word for fur bearing animals. Any discussion on that? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The other amendment I would propose would be on line 20. As Representative Claussen mentioned, we've got a reviser's bill that would start adding dollar signs to these fee amounts. So the proposed amendment would be to add a dollar sign next to the $20 figure at the end of line 20. So I'd move that. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed? That amendment's passed. Any other amendments on this bill? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Senator Grew is excused. Senator Landon. Senator Salazar. Senator Schuler. Chairwoman Ellis. 4 aye, 1 excused, do pass amended.
Thank you, Representative. We'll visit with Senator Boner. I think he's your lead sponsor, if that's correct, and we'll make sure he's aware of our amendments and he'll carry the bill. Thanks so much. That meeting's adjourned. Have a good day.